Sangye Chudang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Chenyen Gi Pe Sonam Gi Prola Penche Sangye Drupa Shu Sangye Chudang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Chenyen Gi Pe Sonam Gi Prola Penche Sangye Drupa Shu Sangye Chudang Soki Chognam La Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kapsuchi Dagi Chenyen Gi Pe Sonam Ki Prola Penchir Sangye Drupa Sho.
Okay, hello, good morning. Let's just do a couple of minutes on the breath. I think the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. in order to do that, first I have to reach enlightenment myself, and in order to do that, I have to study, think about, meditate on, realize all the steps of the path to enlightenment. So therefore, in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, I'm going to study the original lamrim text, Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. So I'm studying this text for the sake of all sentient beings. So briefly like that, generate bodhicitta for this morning session. Okay, so back to the text. So we got up to we were doing 7, 8, 9, preparing to take Bodhisattva vows. We did the 7-limb practice and looking at the Gandhin Lagema and then we went through the Bodhisattva vows in some detail, so that was good. So now we'll try and focus a little more on the text itself. But since it's a while since we looked at it, and since we're still fairly close to the beginning, I'll just read what I'll read the text from the beginning. So it says, Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. Homage to the Bodhisattva, the youthful Manjushri. I pay homage with great respect to the conquerors of the 3 times, to their teaching, and to those who aspire to virtue. Urged by the good disciple Changchub, I shall illuminate the lamp for the path to enlightenment. Understand that there are 3 kinds of persons because of their small, middling, and supreme capacities. I shall write clearly distinguishing their individual characteristics. Know that those who by whatever means seek for themselves no more than the pleasures of cyclic existence are persons of the least capacity. Those who seek peace for themselves alone, turning away from worldly pleasures and avoiding destructive actions, are said to be of middling capacity. Those who, through their personal suffering, truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. For those excellent living beings who desire supreme enlightenment, I shall explain the perfect methods taught by the spiritual teachers. Facing paintings, statues, and so forth of the completely enlightened one, reliquaries, and the excellent teaching, offer flowers, incense, whatever you have, with the 7-part offering from the prayer of noble conduct. We call that, King of Prayers. With the thought never to turn back till you gain ultimate enlightenment, and with strong faith in the 3 jewels, kneeling with one knee on the ground and your hands pressed together, first of all, take refuge 3 times. So that's pretty much where we branched off from. And the next 2 verses read, next, so you take refuge. Next, beginning with an attitude of love for all living creatures, consider beings excluding none, suffering in the 3 bad rebirths, suffering birth, death, and so forth. Sorry, that's wrong emphasis. Beginning with an attitude of love for all living creatures, consider beings, excluding none, suffering in the 3 bad rebirths, suffering birth, death, and so forth. And we think about the suffering of sentient beings in the upper and lower realms. Then, since you want to free these beings from their suffering of pain, from suffering and the cause of suffering, arouse immutably the resolve to attain enlightenment. So we have the commentary on those 2 verses by Geshe Sonam Rinchen. So before that, as we just read, having taken refuge in the special Mahayana way, we train ourselves in the 3 states of mind: love, compassion, and bodhicitta. So special Mahayana ways, generally speaking, when the teachings in refuge, they say there are 2 in the lamrim. They say there are 2 causes for taking refuge. One is a fear of suffering in samsara, positive fear, healthy fear, realistic fear, and the other is faith or confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to guide us from suffering. So there's, the fear of suffering pushing us sort of from behind, and the faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sort of drawing us towards the refuge. So then the Mahayana way is, so that's just thinking of ourselves. So the Mahayana way is to think of all the suffering sentient beings and motivated by the fear of their suffering as well as our own, take refuge in order to reach enlightenment, first in order to enlighten all sentient beings. So that's kind of the 3rd cause, the Mahayana way of taking refuge, doing it with bodhicitta. So verse 10 says, next, beginning with an attitude of love for all living creatures, Geshe Sonam Rinchen says the attitude of love to which the text refers is the affection that sees all living beings as lovable. So that can be a challenge. The stronger our affection, the more easily compassion arises, and the more intense and steadfast it is. Compassion can arise without it, but it will not be consistent. Unless we see all living beings as near, dear, appealing, and beloved, we won't care what happens to them. On the contrary, we may even wish more suffering on those we dislike. That affection is what a doting mother feels for the apple of her eye, what a dog owner feels for a beloved pet, a warm feeling that makes you want to hug and pat and say, adorable. It's a tall order to ask us to feel like that about all living beings. So, I don't know about you, but I think I'm a long way from that, even after all this time. It doesn't come naturally, which is why we need to train ourselves to see them in a new way. At present, our feelings of affection are restricted to those we like, and even then, vanish quickly if they do something that goes against our wishes. In order to develop feelings of closeness and affection, the great Indian master Chandra Goman recommends the technique of seeing all living beings as our mothers, remembering their kindness and wanting to repay it out of a deep sense of gratitude. So, Chandra Goman is the one who wrote that book on this one, on the Bodhisattva vow. Chandra Goman's 20 verses on the Bodhisattva vow. Again, it's translated and comment by Ruth Sonneman, the commentary by Geshe Sonam Rinchen. They put out some great books, Geshe Sonam Rinchen and his translator Ruth Sonam. Seeing all living beings as our mothers, remembering their kindness and wanting to repay it out of a deep sense of gratitude. Another Indian master, Kamala Shila, points out that just as we must prepare an even surface if we wish to paint on it successfully, we first need to develop a sense of equanimity towards all living beings before we can hope to see them as our mothers and feel affection and compassion for them. So we're talking here, about the sevenfold method of generating bodhicitta, or the sevenfold cause and effect method of generating bodhicitta, the 6 causes and the 1 effect. And before we practice that, we practice equanimity or equilibrium, basically to try and see, normally we discriminate sentient beings as friend, enemy, and stranger. So to try and see that those 3 divisions are very short-sighted and not in accord with reality. But because since beginningless time, we've had all these different relationships with all different sentient beings. Each one has been friend, enemy, and stranger an equal number of times. So just because we're discriminating sentient beings at the moment as friend, enemy, and stranger, it doesn't mean they've always been friend, enemy, and stranger. So if we want to develop bodhicitta, we have to even out that discrimination. When practicing immeasurable equanimity, we consider how living beings experience suffering in cyclic existence as a result of their attachment and hostility. We think, wouldn't it be wonderful if they were free from those emotions and could remain in a state of equanimity? May they do so. So we did that just before, didn't we? With the 4 immeasurables. The kind of equanimity to which Kamala Shila refers goes beyond simply wishing this for others. Oh, sorry, I was looking for the footnote about Kamala Shila. Do you remember who he was? In the 8th century, a decisive debate was held in Tibet at Samye between Kamala Shila, a student of Shantarakshita. So remember, King Trisong Detsen invited Shantarakshita, the great Indian abbot, to come to Tibet to establish the monastic tradition, and Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, to employ sort of wrathful tantric methods to dispel hindrances to the spread of Buddhism in Tibet. So as I saw in a documentary about the Gyuto tantric monks, the narrator, I always remember, it said, Padmasambhava came to Tibet exorcising demons and converting the people. So that was his job. And then they, I don't know who started Samyeling exactly. It was Padmasambhava or Shantarakshita, but this was the first Tibetan monastery. And it was around 750 AD or CE, whatever you call it. So Shantarakshita came and he ordained the first Tibetan monks. And Kamala Shila was one of his disciples. So there was this debate between Kamala Shila and a Chinese monk identified as Hashang Mahayana. According to Tibetan sources, the outcome of this debate definitively settled that Buddhism in Tibet would follow the Indian rather than the Chinese model. Broadly speaking, the Chinese position was that all conceptuality acts as an impediment to meditation on reality, and the attainment of enlightenment, all conceptuality acts as an impediment to meditation on reality and the attainment of enlightenment. While Kamala Shila, drawing extensively on scriptural statements, supported the view that certain kinds of conceptuality, which are part of the analytical process of determining the nature of reality, are not only acceptable, but essential. So much modern scholarship considers this famous debate to have centered on the issue of sudden versus gradual enlightenment. Political considerations may also have played a role in the outcome. Fancy that. So Kamala Shila's stages of meditation, Gomrim, sets forth his views describing the gradual development of calm abiding, special insight, love, compassion, and the altruistic intention. So His Holiness has given commentary on Kamala Shila's teachings 2 or 3 times. I think we've been to New York to receive those. I have the book somewhere on translation of one of His Holiness's commentaries. So basically it was whether we do kind of the Zen style of meditation or lamrim. So Kamala Shila won the debate. So that's why, this sort of lamrim method, which comes from Abhisamaya Lankara, I think, Vasanga. That's how that tradition, the lamrim tradition, they decided that's what they'd follow in Tibet. And, what His Holiness calls the Nalanda tradition. So that was Kamala Shila.
So Nick, Kamala Shila was an Indian disciple of
Shantarakshita. Yeah. I've been to Samye, I think 3 times. I think 3 times. So the kind of equanimity to which Kamalashila refers goes beyond simply wishing this for others. Wouldn't it be wonderful if they had equanimity? We ourselves resolve to remain in an unbiased state, free from attachment to some and hostility to others. Not only this, so this is not a mind trick we pray to sort of pretend sentient beings are equal. They are equal, but we don't see it. So it's a question of educating our mind to see reality. We ourselves resolve to remain in an unbiased state, free from not only this, but we try to cultivate the same beneficent attitude towards every living being. When we consider the many faults of our self-concern and the great benefits of cherishing others, we begin to give as much importance to alleviating others' suffering and bringing them happiness as we do to alleviating our own and finding personal happiness. As much importance to alleviating others as our own, or some teachers say more importance to the alleviating the suffering and bringing them happiness to others than trying to get that for ourselves. Recognizing all living beings as our mothers involves focusing primarily on their past kindness to us. When we think about the faults of selfishness and benefits of cherishing others, we acknowledge our complete dependence on them for survival and happiness now and in the future. Everything we desire comes to us through cherishing them. If we could see every creature as near and dear to us and as a beloved friend, how much happier we would be. It's helpful to remember that the mind of every living being is clear and luminous by nature. Faults, such as the disturbing emotions, are not an integral part of it and of the mind. And when right antidotes are applied, they can be eliminated. The mind also has the innate potential to develop the most marvelous qualities when conducive conditions exist. We know this to be true from our own experience. Since our birth, we've acquired many skills and abilities and overcome all kinds of limitations. Thinking about this may help us to recognize the basic good in others. Their disagreeable traits and behavior are not an intrinsic part of their nature. Having aroused affection for them, we consider their condition in cyclic existence. We contemplate their sufferings in bad states of rebirth, the suffering of those in the hells who experience excruciating pain from heat, cold, of spirits continually tormented by intense hunger and thirst, and of animals whose understanding is limited and who live in constant fear. The suffering of animals is apparent to us when we observe them closely. We can only really relate to the suffering of others by starting with the worst human suffering of heat, cold, and starvation, and then imagining something worse. So really, understanding the suffering of others going in cyclic existence really comes first from meditating on our own sufferings in cyclic existence since beginning of this time, in the lower realms and even in the upper realms. All these suffering, the descriptions of life in the 3 lower realms, and then the sufferings in the upper realms, the 6 sufferings, the 8 sufferings, 3 sufferings, the different ways suffering is categorized so that we can meditate on it in these different ways to get a really deep understanding of what we've been through in the past, even though things are, relatively okay at the moment. So then by gaining an understanding through these early lamrim meditations of the depth and extent of the suffering we've experienced, and we can see what others are going through, and from that we can begin to arouse, not only renunciation, not wanting it anymore, but compassion for those who are experiencing it now and will have to experience it in the future. We can only really relate to the suffering of others by starting with the worst human sufferings of heat, cold, and starvation, and then imagining something worse. Human beings suffer birth, sickness, aging, and death. We enumerate these different forms of suffering, but prefer not to think about what they entail. We only need to watch a birth to know how traumatic and painful the passage through the birth canal must be for the baby. Aging is distasteful to everyone but small children who long to be grown up. Everyone else likes to be told they don't look a day older. Even reading about diseases or hearing of other sicknesses fills us with dread that we might contract them. When we actually fall ill ourselves, we feel afraid and helpless. As for death, everyone avoids talking about it. Humans also experience the constant frustration of not getting what they want and getting what they don't want. When we first meet people, they may seem successful and happy, but as soon as we get to know them better, we discover they all have a tale of woe to tell. The seventh Dalai Lama, the great Kelsang Gyatso, said, "High or low, lay or ordained, man or woman, whomever I look at, apart from differences in their clothes, manners, and grandeur, all are alike in that their lives passed in suffering. How sad the sight of my brothers and sisters of equal fortune." In his yogic deeds of Bodhisattvas, it's another text translated by Ruth Sonam and commentary by Geshe Sonam Rinpoche. Aryadeva. So Aryadeva was, Nagarjuna's closest disciple. The high have mental suffering. For the common, it comes from the body. Day by day, both kinds of suffering overwhelm people in the world. Those who are rich and in positions of power and authority suffer anxiety, while the poor and needy mostly experience physical suffering. But all human beings, whoever they are, daily experience one or another kind of trouble. Human beings lose their radiance and emit an unpleasant odor when they're dying. Celestial beings, whose radiance is much greater and whose bodies are naturally fragrant, suffer acutely at the loss of these attributes as death approaches. With their clairvoyant powers, they see where they will be reborn and experience anguish at the prospect of a lower rebirth. So while they're still in the God realm, with all its kind of glories, almost like a Pure Land, at the same time they can see that, they can also see the lower realm into which they're going to be reborn. And the contrast is unbearable, but all they can do is wait. And they can't do anything about it. Since most of those who remain absorbed in deep concentration during a life in the form or formless realms are are ordinary beings. They cannot create fresh virtue while in that state. So, in these, in the different form and formless realms, they're mainly states of meditative absorption, higher and higher states, deeper and deeper states. So the beings, when they're reborn there, they have this thought, oh, now I'm being reborn in this level of concentration. Then they just immediately go into that state of concentration, and they remain there until the karma runs out, and they've used up all their merit. They haven't created more. So then they suddenly realize now this life is finishing, and then they get reborn, usually in the lower realms. Without the support of such virtue, they must take rebirth in less favorable states when the momentum of their meditative stabilization comes to an end. Examining their condition, we see that these beloved living beings are all overwhelmed by the three kinds of suffering caused by their actions and their disturbing emotions: the suffering of pain, the suffering of change, and the pervasive suffering of conditioning. So, these three kinds of suffering, the three divisions of suffering. Nor can they find the happiness they desire. Moved by compassion for their plight, we arouse a strong wish to free them from all forms of suffering and its causes, and lovingly long for their happiness. These feelings of love and compassion must come from the depths of our heart. A veneer of seemingly kind physical and verbal conduct is not enough. So, we really have to meditate. And in order to, again, in order to have this kind of genuine feelings of love and compassion, equally for all sentient beings, we have to do a lot of purification, and we have to create a lot of merit as well. The text explicitly mentions love and compassion, but the need to arouse the altruistic intention, bodhicitta, is implicit. For though we may feel personally called upon to alleviate others' suffering and bring them happiness, we're not capable of it at present. Only a Buddha can help them find true happiness in the most effective way. When the wish to attain enlightenment is constantly present while we walk, sit, stand, or lie down, we're ready to make the commitment associated with the aspiring altruistic intention, aspirational bodhicitta. The constant presence of this aspiration doesn't occur of its own accord, but is the result of consciously arousing it over and over again. By doing this, we sow a seed which, given the right conditions, may sprout someday. Our effort in this creates enormous merit. So as we're thinking about bodhicitta, as we're trying to develop love and compassion, as we're generating, what Rinpoche calls effortful bodhicitta, or artificial bodhicitta. If we say, I'm going to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Just our effort in all these ways creates merit. In the Precious Garland, Nagarjuna praises the virtues of love by saying, even if you donated 300 pots of cooked food 3 times a day, it could not compare to even a fraction of the merit from just a moment's love. I don't know where the example of 300 pots of cooked food comes from exactly. Anyway, that's what he came up with. 3 times a day. On the 15th day of the 4th Tibetan month, on which the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing away are commemorated, so Sakadawa, many beggars come here to Dharamsala and line the road to the main temple. Giving 1 rupee to each beggar is considered a very good thing to do. Nagarjuna refers to a particularly delicious Indian rice dish cooked in a small clay pot. That's where he comes up with it. I don't know what that is exactly. Imagine going to the trouble of preparing 300 individual little pots of food, 1 for each beggar, not just once, but daily. This would create much merit. Yet he tells us that feeling true love and compassion for them and all living beings for even an instant is worth much more. It's said that not only will gods and humans never injure us, they will be drawn to us and will protect us from harm, if we do this practice of love and compassion. We'll experience joy and feel healthy, be invulnerable to poison and weapons, and all our wishes will come true without the need to make much effort. This is quite logical, because if we are peaceful, compassionate, and loving, others are naturally attracted to us, wish to befriend us, and try to be helpful. On the other hand, if we're irritable and unkind, people stay away and we cannot fulfill our desires easily. Through the intense cultivation of love and compassion, we can gain freedom in this life. But even if we don't succeed, we'll enjoy many blessings. It's worth a try, isn't it? When we're thoroughly familiar with such feelings of love and compassion and with the altruistic intention, we will be ready to make the promise never to give up this intention until we attain enlightenment. Merely a strong wish to become enlightened for the sake of others doesn't entail any commitments. However, once we make the promise formally, we commit ourselves to observe the precepts associated with aspiring altruistic intention. Atisha mentions 5 of these precepts in the verses that follow. So verse 12, the qualities of developing such an aspiration are fully explained by Maitreya in the Array of Trunks Sutra. Repeatedly thinking about the many benefits of the altruistic intention as a source of inspiration is the first precept. So always thinking about the benefits of bodhicitta, like Shantideva explains in the first chapter. The benefits are mentioned in many sutras. One of these, the Array of Trunks Sutra, says, so this is, part of the Avatamsaka, or the Flower Adornment Sutra, that, big fat sutra that we read from before when we read, that's where Samantabhadra prayer comes from, the King of Prayers comes from the Avatamsaka Sutra. So the array of trunks is part of that. Child of the noble family, the altruistic intention is like the seed of Buddhahood. So, bodhicitta is the seed of enlightenment. This sutra lists 200 benefits bestowed by the altruistic intention. No matter who we are, once our aspiration to attain enlightenment is firm, we become a bodhisattva worthy of offerings and homage. On account of the marvelous qualities we possess, we naturally outshine hearers and solitary realizers. Even small positive actions, like giving a handful of food to an animal or reciting a mantra just once, create inexhaustible virtue, if done with bodhicitta. We become so solid and strong that everyone can trust and rely on us. We become invulnerable to harm, and even if we're drunk or asleep, harmful spirits have no power over us. The task of Vajrapani, the embodiment of enlightened power, and of other powerful protectors is to guard all beings who have the altruistic intention. It ensures the success of our peaceful, increasing, powerful, and fierce activities. So, these are the 4 activities often mentioned. Peaceful, increasing, powerful, and wrathful. The place where we live is safeguarded from all kinds of disasters, and difficulties when they arise are minor. We will very rarely feel angry, jealous, or attached, and then only briefly. We can bear with equanimity harm that others try to inflict, and we will dislike angry or jealous behavior. These are just some of the many advantages of possessing bodhicitta. In verse 13, having learned about the infinite benefits of the intention to gain full enlightenment, by reading this sutra or listening to a teacher, arouse it repeatedly to make it steadfast. It's important to understand fully just how powerful the altruistic intention is. We must read about it extensively in sutras and in books like Asanga's Bodhisattva Stages. So that's this one, right? Bodhisattva Bhumi. Quite thick. Bodhisattva Stages. We must read about it extensively in sutras and in books like the Bodhisattva Stages, and strengthen it by consciously arousing it 3 times during the day and 3 times during the night. This is the second precept, and it's like keeping a fire going by stoking it at regular intervals. Our aim is to keep the altruistic intention alive day and night until we become enlightened. So, it's really important to be able to be so familiar with bodhicitta, thinking about it all the time, that at the time of death, when our mind starts to get unclear and we start freaking out and everything, hopefully we can generate bodhicitta. And in that, we, remember our guru and generate bodhicitta and, pray that our death is beneficial. So for all sentient beings, and pray to be reborn where we can be of most benefit to others. If we can have thoughts like that at the time of death, then there's no way we'll be reborn in the lower realms. And we can continue our progress. And, we can read Shantideva, Bodhicharya Vatara, and And then, Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book on bodhicitta, this one, his book on patience, his book on the 6 perfections. So these, wherever it is. So these teachings are because they're Lama Zopa's teachings, they're very close to us. And because of our connection with him, can have, reading his teachings have, we get more blessings in our mind. So this is all to do with this second precept of generating aspiring bodhicitta. So first is thinking about the benefits, then thinking about how powerful the bodhicitta is in these different ways. We arouse it again and again by employing techniques like recognizing all living beings as our mothers, or by thinking about the faults of selfishness and the great advantages of cherishing others, about our total dependence on others and so forth, until we care about their happiness more than we do about our own. These methods continue to be used to strengthen the determination to attain enlightenment for their sake, others' sake, long after the altruistic intention has begun to arise spontaneously. So, if we're fortunate enough to have bodhicitta arise spontaneously, then, we use these methods to strengthen it. So, if we can trick ourselves into, as soon as we wake up, bodhicitta being one of the first things we think of, to motivate this day, you think, like we do at the beginning, the purpose of my life is to free sentient beings to lead to enlightenment. Therefore, I'm going to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. If you can have a little card or something next to your phone, or some message. I don't know if you can have some message pop up on your phone, or whatever you look at first when you wake up. To remember to this day is devoted to developing bodhicitta and reaching enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. As I said the other day, His Holiness also has, his first thought is, he says, remember, things don't exist as they appear. So if we can have those two thoughts, just remember, things don't exist as they appear. I can't, what my senses are telling me is not true. So I can't trust what my senses are telling me. Don't believe it. And then, the purpose of my life is to attain enlightenment. I'm going to spend, I dedicate my day to working for the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And then we remind ourselves throughout the day. And that's what this is talking about. Long or short rituals and recitations may be used when arousing the altruistic intention. A simple ritual is to visualize Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, our field of merit, to then perform the 7-part practice and to take refuge and generate the altruistic intention by means of the verse, which is commonly recited. With the one we do 3 times just before we start. in the Buddha's Dharma and Sangha, I go for refuge till I'm enlightened. You know, by merit created by listening to teaching, they are quickly originally, or by, we say that before teachings, or, the merit created by practicing generosity and the other perfections, they quickly become Buddha to enlighten all sentient beings. So we can use those verses like that, or, whatever we think works best for us. If we've taken refuge, we're supposed to generate the refuge, I think, 3 times in the morning and 3 times at night. So if we recite that verse, it also accomplishes that. People are usually eager to attend when His Holiness the Dalai Lama performs the ritual for promising to maintain the aspiring altruistic intention, bodhicitta. So, His Holiness has given it online a number of times over the last couple of years. So you can find one of those times in the videos at dalailama.com. So you can even, bookmark that and generate bodhicitta with His Holiness every day if you want to. Therefore, even though we aren't bodhisattvas yet, many of us have made a promise and should do what we can to observe the precepts associated with it. We can enhance and enrich our understanding through reading, but hearing about the altruistic intention for a spiritual teacher inevitably makes a deeper impact. So, as with His Holiness, we can find Lama Zopa Rinpoche or, many other of our teachers giving teachings on bodhicitta on YouTube these days. So even though it's harder to go to travel, or harder for teachers to come at the moment, we can find lots of teachings to listen to and watch that can inspire our practice. When Domtomba was dying, so, he was Atisha's main disciple, his interpreter. He was said to be a manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, like His Holiness is. When Domtomba was dying, his disciple Geshe Pottewa was grief-stricken at losing his spiritual teacher and lamented that he felt as destitute as a blind man on a vast barren plain. Domtomba consoled him and told him always to be kind-hearted, to look on the great Mahayana treatises as his spiritual teacher, and to keep the company of good friends. So, Domtomba established the Kadampa monastery at Reting. A lot of it, some of it was destroyed by the Chinese, some of it has crumbled over the last 1,000 years. But that was the home for the Kadampa Geshis. So many of them lived there, and there were many stupas erected to these famous Kadampa Geshis when they passed away. And a lot of these stupas have not been maintained. I don't know if they were intentionally destroyed. I went to Reting once. But His Holiness said that if he ever were able to retire to Tibet, Reting is the place where he'd go to live. Interesting. There's a large circumambulation path around the whole place. There's the monastery itself, which has many important relics in it. And there's all these stupas, or remains of stupas, and there's a circumambulation path around it. One of the stupas that has been maintained or does still exist is Geshe Potawa's stupa. So, you know, the Kadampa Geshis lived together there. You know, they were all spiritual friends living together. Always be kind-hearted, to look on the great Mahayana treatises as a spiritual teacher, and keep the company of good friends. So when the Buddha was dying, all his disciples were lamenting, and they said, what will we do without you? And then he said, what did he say? Let the Dharma, let the teachings be your guide or be your light, something like that. So the next verses are 14. The sutra requested by Viradatta fully explains the merit therein. At this point, in summary, I will cite just 3 verses. If it possessed physical form, the merit of the altruistic intention, bodhicitta, would completely fill the whole of space and exceed even that. So if the merit of bodhicitta were to manifest in physical form, it will more than completely fill all of space. If someone were to fill with jewels as many Buddha fields as there are grains of sand in the Ganges to offer to the protector of the world, this would be surpassed by the gift of folding one's hands and inclining one's mind to enlightenment, for such is limitless. So, you know, if we just prostrate, do a hand prostration to think about bodhicitta, you know, how wonderful it would be to have realized bodhicitta, then that creates more merit than filling with jewels as offerings as many Buddha fields as there are grains of sand in the Ganges. So Rinpoche always says that doesn't really mean the river Ganges, because, you know, as vast and wide as that is, as much sand as there is, there's not as much sand in the Ganges as there is in the Pacific Ocean. So Rinpoche always says, actually that means the sand from the Pacific Ocean. So that's a lot of Buddha fields, that's a lot of jewels. But prostrating to bodhicitta just with our hands creates more merit than that kind of offering. I'm not sure if the sutra requested by Viradatta has been translated. Atisha summarizes 3 verses from the sutra requested by Viradatta, which contains 2 analogies. The merit created by the aspiring altruistic intention has no physical form, but if it did, not the sky nor even the vastness of space could contain it. If one filled as many Buddha fields as there are grains of sand in the ocean with the most precious jewels found in the human celestial worlds, and one did this not once but many times as an offering to the Buddha, it would create immense merit. Yet the merit created by just folding one's hands in a gesture of homage to the 3 jewels and wholeheartedly wishing to attain enlightenment creates infinitely more merit. Okay, here the Ganges does not refer to the Indian River, but is a synonym for the ocean. So if we if we keep remembering and thinking about the benefits of bodhicitta, how wonderful it would be to have that all the time during the day, again and again, we really would create an incredible amount of merit. Maybe we should set our alarm to go off every hour in order to remind us to think of the benefits of bodhicitta and the benefits of attaining enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. Verse 18, having developed the aspiration for enlightenment, constantly enhance it through concerted effort. To remember it in this and also in other lives, to remember it in this and also in other lives, keep the precepts properly, as explained. So if we keep the precepts, it'll help us remember bodhicitta, but we can also set an alarm. And if we constantly remember it in this life, then it'll be easier to remember it in future lives, which is really important. So then a commentary, unless we create a strong store of positive energy, our altruistic intention may decline. We can prevent this by continually thinking of ways to help others and by using every opportunity to create merit. This is the third precept. When we feel happy, we dedicate that happiness and its causes to the happiness of living beings throughout space. When we're unhappy, we make the wish that our own pain and unhappiness may replace that of all other living beings and pray for the vast ocean of suffering in which they're drowning to dry up. So, taking and giving, practicing Tonglen, taking the suffering of others and giving them our happiness and merit. We create merit by making offerings to the three jewels, by supporting the spiritual community, by acts of generosity to others, and by giving ritual cakes to harmful spirits with the wish to satisfy them. We thank them for giving us an opportunity to practice and treat them with compassion because we know their actions will cause them to suffer in the future. I know sometimes it's a bit hard for us to relate to spirits. It's not really culture, part of the culture in which we grew up, like it is in Tibet, for example. But I wonder if we thought about harmful people that we know. We can see people around the world giving harm and to others. So maybe mentally we can make offerings to them, and pray that they develop bodhicitta and stop their harmful actions. In his 8 verses for training the mind, there's another translation and commentary of that by Geshe Sonam Rinchen and Ruth Sonam. So they've translated many of the important Mahayana texts that we rely on. So Geshe Langri Tangpa, who wrote the 8 verses, so we sometimes recite that when we're doing Guru Puja. But Rinpoche, Lama Zopa Rinpoche has also put together a whole practice around the 8 verses called the Ever-Flowing Nectar of Bodhicitta, which is a practice with Chenrezig, like a little sadhana that he put together. So Geshe Langri Tangpa was one of the Kadampa masters and a spiritual heir of Atisha. His work, the 8 Verses for Training the Mind, inspired a number of other texts in the mind training tradition. The Tibetan text and English translation are given in Geshe Rapta and Geshe Dagi, Advice from a Spiritual Friend. That was very modest of Ruth, not to mention her, but maybe they hadn't published their commentary on the 8 verses when they did this. But Advice from a Spiritual Friend is a commentary by Geshe Rapta and Geshe Ngon Dage on 7-point mind transformation and Atisha's dual rosary of a Bodhisattva. So there's no commentary on the 8 verses. It's just Brian Beresford's translation is added to that book as just another mind training text. So that was the second book that Wisdom Publications ever published. It was published in 77. Geshe Langri Tangpa didn't live at Reting, his monastery. The way we went to Reting was we went east from Lhasa, and then we went past the amazing I don't know what you call it. Not really a village, but a gathering, a small settlement called Yerpa, which was one of Atisha's favorite places to do a retreat. So there's a small monastery building and Atisha's retreat place and so on. It's up on the mountain. So you go past there and then you turn left up the Pembo Valley and you go up all the way up Pembo Valley and then you go over some mountains and then you go northeast to Reting. So as you enter the Pembo Valley on the left, I don't think we went down there. But on the road, there's a road to the left, and down there you can see the Langri Gompa, Geshe Langri Tangpa, Dorji Senge's place, where he stayed. In his 8 verses, he says, Geshe Langri Tangpa says, that all living beings surpass even a wish-fulfilling jewel. If such a magic jewel falls in the mud, it cannot extricate itself. But if someone comes along, picks it up, washes and fixes it to the top of a victory banner, it can grant many wishes. So I don't know if there was actually ever a jewel like that or it's just a myth. Living beings are like a wish-fulfilling jewel, though. It's very difficult for them to escape without any assistance from the swamp of samsara into which their actions and disturbing emotions plunge them. But if we cherish and help them, they will grant all our wishes. We find ordinary happiness and the supreme happiness of enlightenment through them. So the 4th precept is never to give up living beings, not even a single one. If we do so, we at once lose the altruistic intention to attain enlightenment for the sake of all living beings. So these aren't the 18 root vows and the 46 secondary vows. I mean, these are similar to those in some cases. Remember, the 18th root vow, giving up bodhicitta, it doesn't need the 4 conditions. It's just, if we give up one sentient being, we lose our bodhicitta and we've broken a root bodhisattva vow, which is kind of quite a heavy negativity. So we should recognize that immediately and do a purification and restore it. How can we learn never to abandon them, all sentient beings? If we know how to transform all adverse circumstances into conditions that help us towards enlightenment, we'll never be tempted to abandon anyone. So even when someone tries to harm us or does something really bad, we can, instead of getting upset and abandoning, leaving that person out of our compassion, we can transform that action with bodhicitta. A farmer who has good seed and a fertile crop and a fertile field can expect a bountiful crop. If he's wise, he will tend his field carefully once he's sown the seed. We should remember that when we sow the seed of generosity or ethical discipline in the field of living beings, much good will come of it. So it is worth cherishing them. What does abandoning living beings mean? When we see how ungrateful, unpleasant, and rough some of them are, we may wish to have nothing further to do with them. If we abandon even one living being in this way, we may eventually abandon others as well. Forsaking them is considered a grave fault. Imagine you've promised food and clothing to somebody destitute. When that person comes to your door, you change your mind and refuse to give them anything. How dreadful. The result of such miserliness toward one person is rebirth as a hungry spirit. Yet when we commit ourselves to hold the altruistic intention, we make the far greater promise to free all living beings without exception from suffering and give them happiness. Breaking that promise by abandoning even a single one, has very grave consequences. Special care is required in our relationship with those who are close to us, those towards whom we feel an instant dislike, and those to whom we have been kind and who respond ungratefully. So special care is required in our relationship with those who are close to us, those towards whom we feel an instant dislike, and those to whom we've been kind and who respond ungratefully. We honor, respect, and make offerings to the enlightened ones, but we neglect and abandon living beings, although our attainment of Buddhahood depends as much on them as it does on the Buddhas. In the 6th chapter of Bodhicharyavatara, Shantideva says, the qualities of Buddhahood are gained through living beings and victorious ones alike. Why then do we respect the victorious ones, the Buddhas, and not living beings in the same way? Observing the first 4 precepts help us to maintain the altruistic intention in this life. To ensure that we will also have it in future lives, we practice the 5th precept, which is to refrain from the 4 black activities and cultivate the 4 white ones. I don't know if we need to come up with a better term these days for, black for negative and white for positive. I think, but this is, black is kind of darkness and ignorance, and white is kind of light and wisdom and enlightenment. So that's why these colors are used. in this way, going back all the way into India. So it was nothing to do with race, obviously. You know, we can say negative and positive, I guess. So the first black action, it says, the first negative action is intentionally to deceive the abbot. So these are all connected now with the fifth precept. Which is to refrain from 4 negative activities and practice the 4 positive ones. The first negative action is intentionally to deceive the abbot who has ordained us, our spiritual teacher who gives us teachings and who may also support us materially, or those who possess qualities which make them worthy of offerings. So in the monasteries, you know, the geshis, the teachers who were responsible for students were responsible not just for their education, but also for their food and clothing and general physical welfare, medicine, you know. So intentionally deceiving our abbot or a spiritual teacher or those who possess qualities that make them worthy of offerings. So we must not deceive such people, you know. The second negative action is to cause someone who is happy about what they've done or are doing for others to regret their good action. For instance, by telling them they've made a mistake because the people they are helping don't deserve it. The third is to speak disparagingly to others about someone who's practicing the Mahayana in a correct and sincere way. We may hint that the person is acting improperly, mention a particular kind of improper action, or even specify when and toward whom it was performed. This could have the very deleterious effect of making the person to whom these comments are made feel disillusioned and turn away from the great vehicle. The fourth negative action is to behave towards others with dissimulation and deceit out of an impure intention. Both dissimulation and deceit are usually motivated by attachment. Dissimulation may be a pretense to have qualities one doesn't possess, while deceit refers to hiding faults, bad qualities, or bad intentions. So manipulating another person for one's own purposes is an example of this negative action. For example, you wish to send someone on an errand, but doubt that the person would be willing to go so far away. So you begin by asking if he do something for you much closer to home. When he agrees, you casually say, well, when you're there, I wonder if you'd mind going to this next place. It's not much further. So tricking people like that. These 4 negative actions undermine our kindness in this life and are an obstacle to remembering the altruistic intention in the future. The 4 positive actions counteract them. The first is never at the cost of one's life or just as a joke to deceive any living being. If we're conscientious, not to deceive any living being, if we're conscientious about this, it prevents the first of the 4 negative actions. The second positive action is to be honest and sincere in all our dealings with others, which counteracts the 4th negative action. So we really need to write these down and see which one does what. You know? The second is to be honest and sincere in all our dealings with others, which counteracts the 4th negative action. The third is to see them as our teachers, to see others as our teachers and cultivate pure perception of them, particularly bodhisattvas. This counteracts the third negative action. Since bodhisattvas don't wear name tags, it's safe to behave like this toward all living beings, since we don't know who's a bodhisattva, who's not. So if anyone is a bodhisattva, you could maybe wear a name tag to make it easier for people not to be negative towards you. But others may not be wearing the tag, so it better be good, nice to everybody. When it's appropriate to praise them, we should be ready with our praise and not withhold it. The fourth positive action is to encourage those over whom we exercise some influence not to enter the lesser vehicle, but the great vehicle, because its teachings are the highest and most comprehensive. This counteracts the second of the negative actions. We create no fault if our efforts to persuade them are fruitless. So trying to practice, encouraging people to practice the Mahayana rather than the Hinayana, if we can, is this fourth white action, fourth positive action. Jangchup the ruler who invited Atisha to Tibet, his second question was whether bodhicitta could arise in an ordinary person. I'm not sure what his first question was. Remember, did we talk about his Jangchupa's first question? Anybody remember that? Okay. His second question was whether bodhicitta could arise in an ordinary person. This question raises a doubt as to whether a bodhisattva who is not an exalted being, namely one who has not yet reached the Mahayana path of seeing and embarked on the bodhisattva stages, can have real altruistic intention. So remember the 5 paths: accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, no more learning. So the path of seeing, where you have realization of emptiness, a bodhisattva who achieves that, then attains the first of the 10 bodhisattva stages. In the text, Atisha advises how to maintain the altruistic intention in future lives through practicing restraint from the 4 negative actions and cultivating the 4 positive ones. Exalted bodhisattvas on the bodhisattva stages would never perform any of these negative actions. The implication, therefore, is that those who have not yet reached this level do not have the actual altruistic intention, but must protect it from being impaired by unwholesome actions. In the 6th chapter of Engaging in the Bodhisattva Deeds, Bodhicharyavatara, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, Shantideva says, "You who wish to guard your mind, I beseech with folded hands, always make effort to safeguard both mindfulness and mental alertness." So the 6th chapter is a chapter on patience. "You who wish to guard your mind, I beseech with folded hands, always make effort to safeguard both mindfulness and mental alertness." He reminds us that without mindfulness and mental alertness, we cannot stop the disturbing emotions from arising automatically. What is mindfulness? It's the ability to remain focused on a positive object without forgetting it. What is mental alertness? Watchful observation of our physical, verbal, and mental activities to see whether they are wholesome or unwholesome. We need both in order to protect ourselves from distraction and disturbing emotions. So remember, when we're practicing single point of concentration, like on the breath, we try to do at the beginning, 95, 96% of our mind is mindfulness, remembering constantly, I'm focusing on the breath. You don't say it because you're focusing on the breath, but somehow our mindfulness, our memory, that's what we're supposed to be doing, should be strong in order to keep our mind on the breath. And then watchful alertness is like a sentry that's observing for sort of impending distraction coming across the horizon to take our mind off the breath. So with that watchful alertness, when we see distractions coming, we try to deflect them before they can disturb the main part of our mind, which is focused on the breath or whatever the object of concentration is. Mindfulness can only be cultivated towards something with which one has previously gained familiarity. Our task is first to discern what is and is not constructive by learning about it and observing our own experiences. Then to remain mindful of it and to be constantly aware of our thoughts, feelings, and the physical and verbal activities to which they give rise. Our task is first to discern what is and is not constructive by learning about it and observing our own experiences. Then to remain mindful of it and to be constantly aware of our thoughts, feelings, and verbal activities to which they give rise. As soon as we find ourselves becoming involved in anything unwholesome, any negative action, we must be conscientious about stopping it from going any further. So if we see anger arising, or jealousy, or pride, or attachment, becoming familiar with our own patterns of delusion, ignorance, attachment, aversion, those are, all those delusions. And then becoming familiar with how they occupy our mind, and then learning how to apply the antidotes. And then when we're familiar with them, have the mindful alertness, mental alertness to see them coming before they can actually really fully occupy our mind. Then resolve, or anger coming, I'm not going to follow that, whatever. Only through mental discipline, not just through control of our physical and verbal conduct, can we hope to keep our precepts of training. The wild elephant of the mind tends to run amok, but we can fetter it to something wholesome. So one time when Lama Yeshe was talking about trying to develop single point of concentration or meditating on the breath, for example, he said, so we have to remember that we're meditating on the breath, keep bringing our mind back to it. But sometimes it can get very frustrating, we can start getting irritated. So if we're finding it difficulty, we have to be kind to ourselves because it takes quite a lot of practice. And he said, rather than getting annoyed or upset or giving up, generate loving kindness. So sort of a form of bring into a little sort of form of analytical meditation to support our stabilizing meditation. And think, well, just not just me, all sentient beings have this difficulty. Most sentient beings don't even know about single pointed concentration or developing this this quality. So, feel compassion for, other sentient beings being even further away from it than I am, And then when we're filled with compassion and loving kindness towards others, that sort of, positive feeling in our mind, then come back to our meditation. So we can alternate like that. On the other hand, if we're trying to develop single pointed concentration, and then we keep thinking about bodhicitta, or we keep remotivating, I'm doing this in order to reach enlightenment of sentient beings, like generating bodhicitta like that, while we're in a session, that's actually a distraction. So, we have to know about balancing those, Lama's advice and the general advice on developing concentration. When we try and develop concentration, we should really only be thinking about the object of concentration. I mean, not thinking about it, but focusing on it. Okay, so this is a lot. Just reading through this, there's a lot of substance in here. So I think it's a really important book to have. And when we go through it like this, if, in the week after these classes, then can read what we did and actually meditate on it, think about it. Develop your own wisdom about these topics. That's more effective than just listening to me reading this and going off here and there, because that's kind of pretty ephemeral. And it's not the same as getting this teaching from a lama. So we need to do our own kind of reinforcement in between the sessions. So that was verse 18. So His Holiness gives very short commentary on those 4 positive actions and 4 negative actions. So I think we'll start there next time with His Holiness's brief commentary on that verse, and then continue on to verse 19. And if you do have this book, then go through what we just read and make a list of those 5 precepts that Geshe Sono Rinpoche was talking about. Okay. Thank you very much. So, we generated bodhicitta at the beginning. We've been talking and thinking about bodhicitta this whole time. So that's like amazing. Create a lot of merit. So we need to dedicate that. So I think, because of this merit, So don't just vaguely think merit. You can visualize, as many Buddha fields as there are grains of sand in the Pacific Ocean, filled with precious jewels, overflowing all of space. Think of that huge amount of merit, which is, so hard to create and so precious, the cause of all happiness and success. We dedicate that, protect it. I think, because of this merit, huge part. May I quickly reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So, really consciously dedicate it like that. Because when we do the prayers, sometimes we're just thinking of the words, not really thinking of the meaning, not feeling the meaning. Even though we have an excellent chant leader. Take it away, Bob.
Saji Perki Juxing Metok Tram Re Rabling Jini Degyan Padi Sange Jing Du Mingte Uwagi Drokon Nam Daching Lacher Pashuk Jetun Lame Kotse Rapten Ching Nam Katrin Le Chok Chugi Padang Lo Sang Ten Pedrin Me Sasungi Drove Mun Sel Tak TuEgyur Chik Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. In that snow mountain encircled land, source of every benefit and joy, may Lord Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezig remain in life till samsara's end. Savior, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Mahayana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. Through this virtue, may I swiftly, having gained Guru Buddha's state, place each and every sentient being without exception in that state. Precious supreme Bodhi mind, may where unborn arise and where born never decline, but increase forevermore. Make se wei ter chen chen rizik. Remake in Pei Wang Po Jong Pel Yang Gang Chen Ke Pei Su Gen Song Ka Lo Sang Gra Pei Jab La So Wa De. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thanks again, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody.